Hey everyone, it's Selwen here, and today I'm here to answer what is bright memory. Well, bright memory is a bit of a weird one as I stumbled upon it on a GIF. Now, what I saw on that small GIF or video was rather impressive. I mean, it looked like a full-on AAA game. Badass, fast-paced shooting with a blend of tech powers, a sci-fi sword of sorts, and some pretty impressive graphics, at least for an indie game. Soon after, I found out that the game was about to be released on Steam, a first-person game made by one single guy in China, on his spare time. No less. The so-called episode 1 and technically on early access, which is something I tend to avoid, but here I was just too goddamn curious to test it out. Now, the game is very ambitious and you do notice that it has that feel that was made by a very small company or, well, one person. And even though on a quick glance it might not appear so, but again it's on early access, nevertheless I do have to point out these things. I do also want to talk about the options menu and the game's performance, but I'll leave that towards the end of the video. So the game is set in this weird sci-fi world where all of this cool tech is available to you, but also blends it with fantasy themes, as most enemies that you will encounter will be straight out of one. You play as Shelia, being a member of the Natural Science Research Organization is now in search of an ancient artifact capable of recalling the dead. You then are sent off to a distant land where ancient and mythological creatures exist, while at the same time you're going against this military organization to find the said artifact. Basically think superpowered sci-fi Asian Tomb Raider. But putting that aside, how does the game play? Well, pretty straightforward. If you ever played any FPS game in your life, you get a pretty decent assault rifle, a sort of automatic shotgun, and a pistol. Now, that said, the gameplay feels amazing. It's not those shooters where bullets feel like rubber and you just shooting sandbags. No, the shooting feels great. There's a good kick to your weapons, a nice feedback on the enemies, both visual with a lot of blood splashes and auditory. Now, you don't only have fire weapons, but you also have a sword. Now, this sword is a katana of sorts, but it's also infused with some badass tech that makes it a sort of light slicing weapon where your attacks are not only melee, but have some range to them. And like the fire weapons, it does feel great to use. It feels powerful and very meaty. However, there is some clunkiness. For one, the keybinds are kind of awkward because the way it works is that you press E and you activate the sword and you have this limited window where you can use it before it goes into cooldown. Now, you have to hold it in order to keep on slicing the enemies into pieces, but you also have two other attacks that you can do during that window. A sort of forward burst and a downwards impale where it produces this area of effect damage and sends enemies flying. However, the keybind to do that is the wheel up or wheel down on your mouse, respectively, which wouldn't be my keybind of choice, just not as responsive as a button press. Sadly and awkwardly, this then led me to find out that keybinds are not modifiable on the early access of the game for some weird reason, but at some point it will be possible to do so, I'm sure, so there's that. Nevertheless, it is a fun weapon to use, just with that slight clunkiness. Now, that's not the only powers that you own. You also possess an EMP power on the F key, but not a typical EMP, but one where it has this burst attack sending enemies flying. It does have a sort of cast time where you can fit other abilities, more on that in a bit, although I would prefer it to be instant, as I believe would fit better with the overall fast style of the game. Adding to that ability, there's also a tractor, I mean, whatever that means, basically a grappling hook of which you can use to traverse certain bits of the environment, but also charge to enemies and damage them. So you can combo these attacks very effectively, like sending an enemy flying with the EMP, then rushing towards them with a grappling hook and finishing them off by slicing them up, and then go back to shooting them. You even get a combo meter that incentivizes this type of gameplay, going up in points and giving you a score akin to action games like Devil May Cry and many others. So finding ways to combo all these powers and your firearms is where you're gonna have the most fun with this game, and graphically is represented perfectly. Adding to that, you also have some movement abilities. Holding your movement keys and clicking shift for sprinting will allow you to dash / teleport short distances, especially useful since a lot of these enemies are melee based. Holding the spacebar also enables you to double jump with a jetpack. Like the powers, it feels fun to use and adds to the overall fast shooting style of the game, so you're going to be comboing all of those powers, jumping and dashing everywhere, which makes it for some pretty crazy awesome fun. As you might have noticed, it has that feel of an older FPS game, or to make a more modern example, a game like Doom, albeit with constant powers where you're just defeating hordes of enemies in these imaginative ways. It could do with more weapon variety, for sure, and it might in the future, but the powers supplement them pretty well. Now, you do have more skills and powers to unlock. As you kill enemies, you gain XP, which annoyingly you have to physically pick them up. It's just a minor frustration and annoyance for no added benefits and can potentially make you miss out on XP. But the XP that you gain, you can use to purchase more powers or skills, like a time freeze, which you can combine with your sword, or a lightning sort of attack, which again serves as more added fun with the game's combat and combo system. An AoE attack called Light Force around your character, and a power-up called Power Surge by clicking both Q and E key at the same time, which is also a bit awkward. All these powers are great fun to use, just the keybinds again get slightly awkward by having the EMP, lightning attack, and time freeze all on the same key, on the F key, and sharing the same cooldown windows, but it works. You do have some other boring passive powers, however, like do more damage or take less damage. In general, it's a pretty straightforward progression sort of system, but it does add to the game as you look forward to unlock those powers for added combos. Sadly, with the episode 1 only available, it leaves very little room to unlock them, requiring multiple playthroughs, and for some reason exiting the game, it completely removed my XP count because reasons. Now, overall, the combat feels great. There's minor annoyances, some that I've mentioned, but others weird and small pet peeves, such as small time stops or slow motions, which are meant to show off the stylish combat and effects, but can also break the combat flow sometimes. Weird cutscenes popping in the middle of combat. There's also some clunkiness with the melee enemy animations or even the muzzle flashes of the enemy weapons. They do have that sluggish feel to them. And there's this weird moments where your character hovers in the air with a jetpack when you use your grappling hook or sword, which adds to the overall stylish gameplay and is an unintended mechanic, but I couldn't help myself but feel awkward when it happened. A lot of the time I went flying without wanting to and sort of stayed there floating without much control as I sliced away at enemies. A cool idea just needs to be slightly polished, or maybe give us some minor control in the air. There's even a power that enables you to do so while firing your normal weapons, not just your sword, so it has the potential to be a really fun mechanic to mix your combos. As for your enemy variety, they are alright. There is your sort of skeleton melee enemies, a shielded variant. There's some lizard people, wolves, bats, soldiers, and a fly snake. I'll explain that in a minute. Overall, the enemy AI is pretty easy to deal with. Melee enemies in particular force you to use all of your powers, dashes and jumps, as sometimes you can get overwhelmed. Soldiers are the most boring type to fight against, but they do have some units that have similar powers as yours, proving to be a bit more of a challenge. Bosses are the weakest side for sure, feeling mostly as a bullet sponge type of enemy. One of the bosses looked great, but his attacks were ridiculously easy to avoid, and his AI wasn't the best. Most of the time it stared at walls. But all of this wouldn't be as great if it wasn't for the graphics. They aren't out of this world, but for an indie game and for a single developer, they are honestly rather impressive. Enemy models look great, albeit animations could be improved, but I wouldn't expect much from such a small team. Environments are decent, but the game world is rather small. It's super basic and linear level design, and that's where most improvement could lie. There is some sections where you have some platforming, if we can call it that, with the grappling and jetpacking, and even a puzzle area to complete. All of this is appreciated, and it adds to the variety of levels and gives these little breathing rooms between all the shooting. It did feel a little bit gamey, like here it is your puzzle area, here it is your shooting gallery, here's your platforming. So more of these, but made it so it fits more naturally within the world, and potentially some secret areas or just more open areas to explore would make going through these same levels a far more fun experience. But besides that, as graphical fidelity is concerned, goes hand in hand with some AAA games. So this leads to another slight issue, which is language. Now, the game is in English, but the original developer is Chinese. Don't be surprised to even see some Chinese letters at times in the UI. Not only that, the voice acting, it's not only horrible, is also only available in Chinese. So you're gonna have to pay attention to subtitles if your Mandarin isn't up to snuff. Which is fine, early access game, one developer, so that's completely understandable, but the translation could do with some work. Fly Snake is a funny example I gave, which is a translation to dragon. There's other examples such as current XP is have XP, keep look for exit. I mean, it's worse than my English, and that's saying something. Honestly, it seems it was translated by Google Translator, but again, easily improvable. So overall, the game is really fun. Taking everything in consideration with the development team is really impressive, even with all of its faults. Sure, the episode 1 was barely 1 hour, but also costs €5 or your region equivalent on Steam. And for sure, more episodes will come as since its release, it got constant updates. So I don't mind at all supporting this game and its developers, as there is amazing potential. Imagine what this guy could do even with a small team, extra polish, a better level design, more variety, and it would be an amazing FPS game with this awesome combo system and powers. It could honestly rival a game like Doom, but even as it stands, it can also be a very enjoyable experience. Now, this leaves the options menu to cover. Now, as I said, keybinds are not modifiable, but when it comes to graphic options, we do have some, and playing it at 4K, I never had a single drop from 60 FPS. This being on Unreal Engine 4, I do have shadows set on medium, since it's a quite hungry setting on high, and AA too, but it's 4K, so it's whatever, and it would be nice to see what type of AA filter is being applied, probably SMAA, but still would be nice to know. But performance overall is pretty great, only when there's a very strong depth of field effect it can dip below 60 in a rather abrupt way, especially on the main menu, which is weird to say the least, and some cutscenes. And that said, the game is super enclosed and small with level design, so there's not much going on besides enemies, so low frame rate wouldn't be justifiable, but still better than some AAA games when it comes to performance. An FOV option will also be appreciated since it's an FPS game, and hopefully it will be added in the future. You can disable the weapon HUD, which might help with the game issue of overburdening you with effects on the screen. The same follows for the style panel, basically the combo points sort of menu that you get when killing enemies and your score, and blood effects. You can also turn those off, but what's wrong with you to have them off in this game? Sound options also have most of what you need, and sound in the game is generally good except for the awful voice acting, and the soundtrack, although fun, it can get a little bit too repetitive. Not the best options menu overall, but it works. And that is as soon as keybinds are modifiable. So yeah guys, that does it for me for today. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this, and as always, I will see you all again soon.